Well, and you talk about the weakness also of those around, like Mike Johnson, John Thune. These are spineless guys who have ceded everything. They don't care about the Congress. You also talk about, kind of at the end of the book, teeing this up, make sure you read all of it. It was fantastic. Some weakness of someone who has profited massively. I always think it's kind of funny that, do you notice how like the media always refers to like Don Jr. and Eric and Kushner too as like the Trump kids? Like these aren't like fully grown adults who should be prosecuted for their like financial crimes. But did you see the interview? It was on CNBC with Don Jr. And Eric, and they were kind of talking about like, well, it's our right to profit massively off the presidency because you kicked us off of Twitter after we did an insurrection. I'm like, I don't really think that these things are balanced. But Jared Kushner is like this as well. And he's done it a little quietly, but at the end of the book, you talk about Kushner kind of getting made fun of a little bit. Jared is having some fun poked at him at the expense of Trump. Do you think there is a certain individual, because you talked about this, kind of the subtle flattery, but the put downs of Trump. It's all a big show when you see him in person. You talk about him as a very different guy. Do you think that's contributed to some of what we see from a Mike Johnson, from a John Thune, from any of these Republicans in Congress who should just say, there is a madman in the White House sending us to war, killing Americans in the streets, spending trillions of dollars, 25th Amendment time, but they just don't do it? Do you think that there's something about those people or something about Trump that leads them to this place where they have given it all up for him?
Well, I love that question, and I try to answer it by creating my own Patriot site. I have a website. You can go on there. And it's a Patriot site where I sell knee pads.
Sold out, correct?
Yeah, well, well, we have new Trump signature series knee pads that just came in. Because the first knee pads all did sell out, just like our law firms sold out, just like our universities were selling out, just like CEOs were selling out, members of the media were selling out, not just those elected officials that you're referencing. And they have to be called out, all of them. I even had to go, last minute I was invited because they didn't want Trump to dominate and flood the zone over there in Zurich, in Davos. I brought the knee pads with me. I'm not going to get invited back. I started handing it out to folks out there. I mean, they're all complicit at this moment. Society becomes how we behave. We are our behaviors. This is happening on our watch. For things to change, we need to change. And that was my mindset after last June when we saw the federalization of the National Guard. I said, I got to step things up. I'm not a bystander. I have agency. We all have agency. I've got to do more. I've got to do better. And we've got to punch back. And so it's right to call all these guys out. We have to call them all out. We have to. We'll lose this country. It's the 200, I mean, it doesn't feel like the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. You know, and we should be celebrating the best of the Roman Republic and best of Greek democracy, co-equal branches of government, popular sovereignty, the rule of law, not the rule of dawn. And I think it's dawning on all of us. We're starting to wake up now. Our immune system has been woken up. You're waking up, not just here in New Hampshire. We're seeing it all across the country. We're seeing it at the No Kings rallies. We're seeing people finally stand up again because people are expressing a deeper understanding of what's at stake. And so, from my perspective, this notion of weakness has marked a lot of my frustration. And I'm not here to, and this is not, I'm not trying to bash my party. But this time...
Sometimes it's necessary.
But this time last year, I was worried. You may have felt differently. You may have said, we got this. But I didn't feel that this time last year. I did, you know, Jack, right after Trump was elected, I got a lot of criticism from members of my own party because I did a special session of the legislature to prepare, they referred to in the press as Trump-proofing California. And that wasn't the frame I used, but I understood that frame in the context of having understood Trump and Trumpism 1.0. I was there, and we write about it in the epilogue briefly. This is not a book about my governorship. But in the epilogue, I write about a story that Jack was referring to and a little bit about Trump and how I met him during my transition. For the first time, I was on Marine One, Air Force One. By the way, there's some good stories here. As he's taking me on the royal tour of the plane into his bedroom. A lot, just saying,
He's got a crush.
There's some interesting stuff here.
You and Zoran, you could really get him.
No, I got to talk to Zoran. I know how this love story ends, Zoran, but we did that, and people said, well, you just, that's a closed fist, not an open hand. I said, well, it's not about that. I hope we don't have to use any of the money we were doing. We did a supplemental appropriation for litigation. We just announced I think it's our 60th lawsuit against Trump. I don't even think there's been, 60 weeks since he's been elected. It's code red. It's not blinking yellow. It's code red. You've seen it. This guy, I was down on this book tour. We kicked it off down there in Atlanta, and I was, met with the commissioners down there in Fulton County. Yeah. I mean, he's going to take over that commission so he can manipulate and manage the outcome, one of the most critical swing districts in the United States for the election this November. We saw what happened on Election Day in California last November when we had an initiative on the ballot. Prop 50 sent out BORTAC teams. These are the Border Patrol tactical units. The guys dressed up, right out of, this is the Apache helicopter guys. And they were all sent out to Dodger Stadium the morning of the election to send a message to our diverse communities. You may not want to show up to vote. Trump sent out on Truth Social that morning, the election was rigged, sent out election monitors from the DOJ, Pam Bondi, who the next day announced the election was rigged, and they observed it, went to the Supreme Court. They are not screwing around. He wants to federalize the election. He says he wants to nationalize it one day, just 15 states elections because of the corruption. What's the SAVE Act? That's not about ID. It's about registration. It's about who gets to vote, who doesn't get to vote. They are not screwing around. We will lose this country. But first, we cannot lose our minds over this shock and awe. And so I just want to long-windedly, sort of back to the introduction here, just thank you all for being here as the antidote to all of that, because you wouldn't be showing up if you'd given up. You wouldn't be here for yourselves and for each other and for this conversation if you had given into the cynicism, fear, and anxiety. So thank you.